As for falling in love with my best friend Mum. I was 8 years old the day we arrived on Willow Lane, a street lined with identical maple trees and perfectly trimmed lawns. My mother kept saying it was a fresh start, but all I knew was that the moving truck smelled like dust, and the August sun was roasting everything in sight. Our new house looked smaller than the pictures, and the white paint on the shutters was peeling. I didn't want to get out of the car. I didn't want a new school. I didn't want new neighbors. Then she appeared. A woman stepped out from the house next door, wiping her hands on a soft denim shirt. She walked across her yard with a kind of confidence that made everything around her seem calmer. Her hair was tied loosely back, strands escaping in soft waves around her face. She carried a plate covered with foil. She smiled like sunshine breaking through humidity. "Hello there. You must be the Millers," she said, her voice warm and steady. "I'm Laura Carter. I live next door. I brought you some cookies I baked this morning." My dad shook her hand. My mom fussed excitedly, but I just stared at her, struck silent in a way I didn't understand. There was something about her presence, something gentle, something safe that made my chest feel strange and tight. Then she looked at me. "And who's this handsome young man?" I swallowed hard. "I'm Michael." "Well, welcome to Willow Lane, Michael." Her eyes softened. "My son, Ethan, is about your age. He'll be thrilled to have someone new to terrorize the neighborhood with." My parents laughed. I didn't. I was too busy trying to figure out why her voice felt like warm honey. A minute later, a boy burst out of the Carter house, all energy and scraped knees. "Mom." Dad said, "Oh hey." His eyes landed on me. "You moving in?" I nodded. "I'm Ethan. You want to see my tree house?" Before I could answer, Mrs. Carter gave a tiny shrug and said, "Go on. I promise he won't get you into too much trouble." That was the first time she smiled directly at me. A small, private smile. It felt like she had chosen me somehow. Ethan grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward his backyard. But as I followed him, I glanced back. Mrs. Carter was still watching us, arms crossed, head tilted slightly, like she already cared whether I fit in or not. It wasn't love. I was too young for that. But something rooted itself inside me that day. A feeling I wouldn't recognize for years. A feeling that would grow quietly, stubbornly, unavoidably. The first house on Willow Lane wasn't just my new home. It was the place where everything began. Ethan and I became inseparable within weeks. We rode our bikes together, traded baseball cards, played video games until our eyes hurt, and spent entire afternoons in the Carter backyard pretending we were explorers, soldiers, astronauts, whatever adventure felt right that day. But the real center of their home wasn't Ethan. It wasn't the backyard or the treehouse. It was her. Mrs. Carter had a way of making their house feel warm even when the world outside felt cold. She'd walk through the rooms humming soft melodies from the radio, her footsteps light, her voice constant and reassuring, and she always noticed everything. If I came in with grass stains on my shirt, she'd laugh and point me toward the laundry room. If I looked tired after school, she'd say, "Rough day, sweetheart," and hand me a glass of cold lemonade. If I did well on a test, she'd high-five me like I just won a championship. She treated me like I belonged there. One day, after school, Ethan and I burst through the door, backpacks thrown on the floor, feet off the carpet. She called from the kitchen without even looking up. We froze. How did she always know? "Sorry, Mom," Ethan muttered. "Sorry, Mrs. Carter," I echoed quickly. She peeked around the corner, raising an eyebrow. "Michael, what did I say about calling me Mrs. Carter? It makes me feel like someone's grandmother." I blinked. What should I call you?" "Laura is fine," she said with a smile. But I couldn't call her that, not then. It felt too intimate, too close, too adult. So she leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "You know what? Call me whatever you're comfortable with. Just don't call me ma'am or I'll start aging faster." I laughed, but inside, something fluttered. She wasn't just Ethan's mom. She was starting to feel like a part of my everyday world. Every after-school afternoon, she'd prepare snacks, grilled cheese sandwiches, apple slices with peanut butter, popcorn sprinkled with cinnamon. Ethan devoured everything without thinking, but I noticed the way she'd glance over to make sure I liked it too. "You okay, Michael? Need more juice? More snacks?" She asked more questions than my own parents sometimes did. One afternoon sticks with me more than others. It was raining hard outside, the kind of rain that made the whole neighborhood smell like wet pavement. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch after playing video games, and I wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the sound of soft music and the clatter of dishes. Mrs. Carter was standing at the sink, sleeves rolled up, washing plates. The kitchen light made her hair shimmer slightly, and the window behind her framed the rain like a painting. I paused in the doorway. She looked up. "Oh, hi there. Ethan knocked out again?" I nodded. "Yeah. He fell asleep during Mario Kart." She chuckled softly, a warm, breathy laugh. That boy could sleep through a tornado. She reached for a towel, drying her hands, and leaned against the counter. "You hungry?" she asked. "A little," I admitted. Without hesitation, she started preparing a sandwich, not just any sandwich, but the kind she knew I liked, with exactly the right amount of mustard. She placed it in front of me like it was the most natural thing in the world. As I ate, she glanced at me thoughtfully. "You're a good kid, Michael," she said. "I'm glad Ethan has a friend like you." I felt something warm bloom in my chest, pride, happiness. Something deeper that didn't have a name yet. I didn't know then that kids don't usually feel this way about their best friend's mom. I only knew this. Her kindness meant more to me than I could explain. Her attention felt like sunlight after a long winter, and though I couldn't understand it at the time, every laugh, every sandwich, every warm smile was slowly shaping the feelings that would eventually change everything. Those after-school evenings weren't ordinary. They were the beginning of a quiet, growing attachment, one I couldn't name, but one I could never forget. Here is the expanded Chapter 3. When you're ready for Chapter 4, just say next chapter. The Carter house had always felt full of laughter, full of noise, full of life. But as I grew older, around 12 or 13, I started noticing the small silences creeping in. At first, they were subtle. A hurried whisper behind a closed bedroom door. A dinner plate placed down a little too hard. A smile from Mrs. Carter that didn't quite reach her eyes. Adults think kids don't notice things, but we do. The cracks begin to show. One Saturday morning, Ethan and I were in the living room building a model airplane. Mrs. Carter was in the kitchen, cooking breakfast, humming along to an old Beatles song. Normally, Mr. Carter would join us on weekends, but that morning he wasn't there. Again, Ethan didn't seem to mind. He was focused on glue and plastic wings, but I couldn't ignore the tension floating through the walls. Then we heard it, a car door slamming, a heavy set of footsteps, the jingle of keys hitting the counter. Mr. Carter had arrived home, looking tired and irritated, still wearing last night's dress shirt. He brushed past his wife without so much as a greeting. "Nice of you to show up," she said softly. He grunted. "I had a meeting." "At 2 a.m.? she asked. His silence was sharp. Ethan kept adjusting the airplane wings, pretending not to hear anything, but I could feel him stiffen beside me. Mrs. Carter's humming didn't return for the rest of the morning. The car ride. Weeks later, something happened that stayed with me for years. Ethan and I had soccer practice after school. Mrs. Carter picked us up because Mr. Carter had other plans. The car was unusually quiet. Even Ethan wasn't talking much. Rain tapped softly against the roof, and she drove slowly. Her eyes focused ahead but distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere far away. Suddenly, at a stoplight, she inhaled sharply, almost a gasp, and pulled the car over to the side. "Mrs. Carter," I asked gently. She pressed her hands against the steering wheel and closed her eyes. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm just tired today." Her voice trembled on that last word. I had never seen her like that. Not once. She was always composed, always patient, always strong. That moment shook me more than any argument could have. I didn't know what to say. I was just a kid, but I wanted to reach out, to fix something, to tell her that whatever was hurting her didn't make her any less warm or wonderful. She cleared her throat, forcing a small smile. "Let's get you boys home." But the smile fell quickly, and the rest of the ride was quiet. Inside the silence, the tension in their house grew over the following months. Mr. Carter came home later and later. Mrs. Carter talked less and less. Ethan withdrew, spending more time playing video games, drowning out the world with noise he could control. And I kept noticing her. How she paused before answering him. How she wiped her eyes discreetly when she thought nobody was watching. How exhaustion started to show in her shoulders, in the way she held herself, in the way she forced her smiles. One afternoon, she was making grilled cheese for us when her hands shook slightly. "You okay?" I asked. She turned quickly. "Of course, sweetheart. Why wouldn't I be?" But her eyes told a different story. A story of a woman trying, every day, to hold together a house whose foundations were starting to crumble. The moment that changed me. Then came the night that marked a turning point. Ethan and I were watching a movie in the living room. Mr. Carter was upstairs. Mrs. Carter was cleaning the kitchen. Again, suddenly, we heard raised voices. "Laura, I can't do this right now. You're never here. You don't even try. Oh, get off it. You don't know what pressure I'm under." The argument escalated fast. Ethan paused the movie, staring at the carpet, jaw clenched. I sat frozen, torn between wanting to leave and wanting to run into the kitchen to make sure she was okay. Then came the sound that made my heart drop. A sob. A real, raw sob. One she couldn't hide behind closed doors. Ethan stood abruptly. "I'm going to my room." He left, but I didn't move. I couldn't. Something inside me made me stay, something protective. Something strong, something I couldn't explain at 13. I waited until the shouting quieted. Waited until the front door slammed and the house shook. Then I walked toward the kitchen. Mrs. Carter was facing the window, arms crossed, staring into the night. She didn't notice me at first, but when she turned, her eyes were red, tears still clinging to her lashes. "Oh, Michael." She rushed to wipe them. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for you to hear all that." I swallowed hard. "It's okay." She smiled weakly. "You boys shouldn't have to see this." That was all she said. But the look in her eyes, tired, vulnerable, human, stayed with me forever. In that moment, something shifted. I didn't admire her because she was beautiful, or because she was kind, or because she fed me and cared for me like a second mother. I admired her because she was strong even when she was breaking. And somewhere deep inside me, a seed began to grow, a feeling that would later become impossible to ignore. High school changed everything slowly at first. The way shadows move across a room when the sun is setting. You don't notice the shift until suddenly everything looks different. New schools, new faces. On the first day of freshman year, Ethan and I walked through the doors of Pinebrook High together. We were both nervous but pretending not to be. By lunchtime, though, we had already started drifting toward different corners of the cafeteria. Ethan joined the gamers and the engineering kids, the ones who spent lunch arguing about computers and comic book timelines. I drifted toward the athletes, tall, loud, energetic boys who crowded around the basketball courts. And just like that, the closeness we'd had as kids softened into something looser, something that stretched instead of snapped. But even as everything else changed, one thing didn't. The Carter house still felt like home, the unspoken ritual. Every Friday after practice, I'd stop by their house. Ethan would sometimes join me, sometimes not. But Mrs. Carter always welcomed me in like I was meant to be there. Her smile came easier when I walked through the door, softer, more genuine. She'd hand me a glass of iced tea before I even asked, as if she had been expecting me. "You boys hungry?" she'd say, even when it was just me standing in the doorway. Sometimes I'd help her cook. Sometimes I'd sit at the counter and talk while she chopped vegetables. Sometimes we said nothing at all, letting the quiet be comfortable between us. Those moments became the highlight of my week. Seeing her differently. I didn't notice the exact moment when Mrs. Carter stopped looking like Ethan's mom and started looking like someone else. Maybe it was the afternoon I came in after practice, sweaty and tired, and she placed a cold hand on the side of my neck to check my temperature. "You're burning up," she murmured, we're increasing her forehead. My heart nearly stopped. Or maybe it was the way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating. A small gesture I found myself watching without meaning to. Or maybe it was the way she laughed one evening, a real laugh, one she hadn't let herself have in a long time, and I felt the sound of it echo inside me. I was 16, old enough to feel things deeply but still too young to understand them. All I knew was that my stomach fluttered when she smiled. My heart beat a little faster when she said my name. And I always noticed when she entered a room, always. The failing marriage. Mr. Carter's presence in the house faded like a photograph left in the sun. He missed dinners. He missed Ethan's science fair. He missed their 16th anniversary. The fights became quieter not because they were resolving anything, but because they were giving up. The silence between them grew thick enough to fill an entire room. One evening, I arrived to find Mrs. Carter fixing a broken porch light by herself. She stood on a small ladder, stretching to reach the fixture, her shirt sleeves pushed up to her elbows. "Need help?" I asked. She startled, then laughed lightly. "Michael, you scared me." I took the ladder from her hands. "I can do it." She hesitated, pride flashing across her face before finally stepping back with a small sigh. "Thank you." I climbed up and adjusted the loose wiring until the bulb flickered back to life. When I climbed down, she looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and something I couldn't name. "You're growing up too fast," she said softly. "It feels like yesterday you were 8 years old and hiding behind your mother's legs." I blushed. I wasn't hiding. "Oh, sweetheart," she teased, "you absolutely were." But then her smile faded. "Thank you for helping," she said quietly. "He was supposed to fix that weeks ago." She didn't say who he was. She didn't have to. A moment I didn't expect. As we stood on the porch, the evening light turned golden, stretching shadows across the steps. "I hate seeing you doing everything alone," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes widened slightly. "Michael, that's very sweet, but I mean it," I said, trying to sound mature. "You don't deserve this." The look she gave me, then a mix of surprise, emotion, and something soft stayed with me for months. But she only placed a gentle hand on my arm and said, "Life gets complicated, sweetheart. You'll understand when you get older." She didn't know that I already understood more than she realized. She didn't know that watching her struggle made something protective rise inside me. A quiet realization. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I finally admitted something to myself. I cared about her in a way that didn't make sense. In a way that no teenager should feel about a woman twice his age. In a way that was deep, instinctive, unexplainable. It wasn't romantic yet, that would come later, when I was old enough to understand what love really meant. But even then, at 16, I felt something strong enough to scare me. I wanted to be someone she could rely on. Someone who didn't walk away. Someone who didn't make her cry behind closed doors. Someone who noticed her not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a person. The truth was simple. I was growing up, and I was growing toward her. The first real snow of that winter hit Willow Lane overnight. By morning, the cul-de-sac was buried under a thick, untouched blanket, sparkling under the pale sun. Kids were already out, shrieking, slinging snowballs, and dragging sleds across yards. I woke up smiling because snow meant one thing. The Carter's annual hot chocolate day. It wasn't an official holiday, but every time it snowed, Mrs. Carter made a huge pot of hot chocolate and invited every kid on the street inside to warm up. It was loud, chaotic, messy, and perfect. Ethan and I had been outside for hours already. Our gloves were soaked, our faces were numb, and we were both breathing like we'd run a marathon when we finally stepped onto the Carter's porch. "You think she made marshmallows this time?" Ethan asked, stomping snow off his boots. "She always does on the first snow," I said without thinking. He snorted. "Dude, you pay more attention to my mom's hot chocolate schedule than I do." I tried to laugh, but something tightened in my stomach. I prayed he wasn't starting to notice things. We pushed the door open. Without knocking, everyone did, and the warmth inside hit us instantly. The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla. Kids filled the living room, shedding coats, spilling snow, and talking over one another. But she stood out instantly. Mrs. Carter was in the kitchen pouring hot chocolate into mugs. She wore an oversized cream sweater and leggings, her hair tied up in a messy bun with curls falling out around her face. The steam from the pot made her cheeks pink. She looked breathtaking. I froze in the doorway. She turned, and when she saw me, her whole face softened. Her smile was small but warm, the kind that curled softly on one side. She looked directly at me before anyone else. "There you are," she said. "I was wondering how long you'd last out there." Ethan shoved his gloves into his pockets. He wanted to stay out longer. I told him he's gonna end up losing fingers. "Oh, please," she laughed. "Michael's the responsible one between you two." That shouldn't have meant much. It shouldn't have felt like a secret compliment. But it did. Then it happened, a look that stayed with me for years. When she handed Ethan a mug, she did it quickly, laughing at something he said. But when she turned to hand mine to me, she slowed down. Her eyes lifted to mine for just a moment longer than necessary. There was nothing inappropriate, no hunger, no suggestion, just a warm, soft look that made my chest feel too small for my heart. A look that said she saw me, not just as Ethan's friend, not just as a neighborhood kid, but as me. "You're freezing," she said quietly as my fingers brushed hers on the mug. Her voice dropped in a way it hadn't with the others. "Make sure you warm up, okay?" My throat tightened. I nodded, but my voice didn't come out. Her eyes flickered downward like she noticed my reaction, then she smiled again, gentle and knowing, before turning back to the stove. It was a moment that lasted maybe 3 seconds. 3 seconds I replayed in my head a million times. The living room exploded with noise, kids arguing over marshmallows, Ethan shouting about a rematch. Snowball fight, but her voice lingered louder in my mind than all of it. "You're freezing, make sure you warm up." And I knew, with a clarity that startled me, that I felt something for her that I wasn't supposed to feel. Something I didn't have a name for yet. Something that scared me and thrilled me at the same time. Because that look, that simple, soft, impossible look, changed everything. By spring, Willow Lane felt alive again. Lawnmowers buzzed lazily on Saturday mornings, kids biked in packs. Windows were propped open to let in the soft breeze. It should have been a peaceful, easy season, but something in the Carter house changed. At first, it was small things. Mr. Carter coming home later, and later, Mrs. Carter shutting the kitchen window when she saw his car pulling in. Ethan getting quiet on days he'd normally be bouncing off the walls. Even at 12, I could sense it, tension, a pressure in the air like the house was holding its breath. One night, it broke open. It was a Friday, late enough that the streetlights were humming. Ethan and I were lying on the floor of his room playing a racing game. He was winning somehow, he always won when I heard it. Voices. Not loud, but sharp. Hurried, Mr. Carter's deep rumble and Mrs. Carter's softer tone rising and cutting through it. Ethan paused the game, staring at the floor like he could look through it. "They've been doing that a lot," he muttered. The house was to quiet between the sharp words. No TV. No footsteps. No clattering dishes. Just their voices slipping under the door like cold air. "You want to go outside?" I asked quickly. He nodded. We slipped out through the back door, crossing the yard toward the swing set. We sat in silence, kicking lightly at the dirt. I didn't know how to comfort him, and he didn't know how to talk about it. We stayed out there until the voices stopped. But even when Ethan seemed relieved, something kept me rooted to the spot, an unsettling feeling pulling at me. "I gotta use the bathroom," I said, standing up. "Okay. I'll wait here." I walked back toward the house, heart thumping. I didn't know why I was nervous. I didn't know what I thought I'd see. I just knew something wasn't right. Inside, the lights were dim. The hall was empty. No yelling now, just quiet. The quiet. Then I saw her. Mrs. Carter was sitting at the kitchen table, elbows on her knees, her face in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. Her hair had come loose from its clip, falling around her as she cried silently. I froze, breath caught in my throat. I'd never seen an adult cry before. Not like that. Not someone who always seemed so strong, so warm, so in control. For a moment, she didn't notice me. When she finally looked up, she gasped lightly and wiped her eyes quickly, trying to gather herself. "Oh, Michael." Her voice wavered. "Sweetheart, I didn't hear you come in." I stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do with my hands or my eyes or my entire body. I was just looking for the bathroom. She forced a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, it's just down the hall." But when she stood to walk past me, her composure cracked. Her chin trembled. Her breath caught. She stopped right beside me, pressing her fingers to her forehead as though trying to hold herself together. Without thinking, I whispered, "Are you okay?" Her breath shuddered. She turned her head slightly toward me, her voice soft, broken. "I will be." Something inside me ached, a protective instinct I'd never felt before. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to take every hurt off her shoulders, even though I was just a kid. She rested a hand briefly on my arm, a touch meant to reassure me, even though she was the one falling apart. Her fingers were warm and trembling. "Thank you for asking," she whispered, and then she walked down the hall, wiping her face, forcing herself steady before she reached the living room where Ethan waited outside, unaware. I stood in the quiet kitchen, heart pounding. It wasn't the look she gave me. It wasn't the touch. It was something deeper. Seeing her cry lit something in me a fierce, protective feeling far bigger than childhood or friendship or anything I understood. That night, I realized something I couldn't have said out loud. I loved her long before I even knew what love was. And now that I'd seen her hurt, I knew that love wasn't going anywhere. By the time I turned 13, the Carter's house felt different in ways I couldn't fully explain. The yelling had stopped, but so had the laughter. Mr. Carter was around less. Mrs. Carter smiled less. Ethan spent more time at my place than his own. But that summer, the summer between 7th and 8th grade, something shifted again. Not in the Carter's house. In me. It started with the heat. July rolled in thick and heavy. The kind of heat that made the asphalt shimmer and turned Willow Lane into a ghost town at noon. Most days, Ethan and I spent hours at the community pool, diving, racing, roughhousing with other kids. But on the hottest day of that month, the pool was closed for maintenance. I remember standing in Ethan's driveway, both of us sweating like we were about to melt into the pavement. "Screw it," Ethan said. "I'm going inside to play Xbox. You coming?" "Yeah. In a sec," I said. I didn't know why I hesitated. I just knew I wasn't ready to be in a dark room yet. He jogged inside, and the second the door closed behind him, I heard her voice. "Michael?" My heart jumped. Mrs. Carter stepped out onto the porch, shielding her eyes from the sun with her hand. She wore jean shorts and a loose white cotton tank top tied at the waist. Her hair was pulled into a messy ponytail, but a few damp strands stuck to her neck. She must have been cleaning or doing yard work. And she looked beautiful. Not like a mom. Not like someone's wife. Not like the woman I remembered as a kid. She looked like a woman. And for the first time, I felt like a boy who noticed. "You're not going inside with Ethan?" she asked. "I will. Just cooling off," I said, which was ridiculous because I was standing in the sun. She smiled, small and soft, like she found my awkwardness endearing. "You look overheated? Want some lemonade? I just made a fresh pitcher." I nodded it quickly. "Yeah, sure." Inside, the house was cooler, dimmer, quieter than usual. Something about the quiet made me hyper-aware of everything. My heartbeat. The sticky shirt clinging to my back. The faint citrus smell of the lemonade she poured. She slid a glass across the counter toward me. "You're getting taller," she said lightly. I nearly choked. I mumbled something like a "yeah, I guess," even though I barely had control of my voice. She laughed softly, a gentle, almost nostalgic laugh. "I remember when you moved here. You were so small you could barely see over the kitchen table." "I wasn't that small," I muttered. "You were," she teased, eyes warm. "You look at everything like it was brand new. You were so curious." "I still am." She tilted her head. "About what? You?" But I didn't say it. I looked down at my lemonade instead. "Just things." She leaned on the counter, studying me in a way that made my cheeks burn. "Not inappropriate, just noticing. You're growing into yourself," she said softly. "It suits you." Nobody had ever said something like that to me. Not a teacher, not my mom, not a girl at school. Her words were simple, but they hit something deep. Before I could answer, the front door opened and slammed. "Mom." "Michael," Ethan called. "Where'd you go?" Mrs. Carter stepped back instantly, her expression switching into her usual warm, motherly smile. The moment shifted back into something normal, something safe, but I felt the difference in the air. Something had changed. Not between us, not yet, but inside me. I followed Ethan upstairs, but halfway up the stairs, I looked back. She was watching me, not smiling, not frowning, just watching, as if she felt something too and didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. But it was something, a quiet shift, subtle but unmistakable. A door cracking open, a feeling waking up, a line being drawn that neither of us meant to draw, but couldn't erase. That summer, I realized the truth. I wasn't in love with a memory of Mrs. Carter anymore. I was in love with the woman standing in that kitchen, looking at me in a way she never had before. And for the first time, I think she knew it. 8th grade ended with a dull thud, grades posted, lockers cleaned out, everyone pretending they weren't terrified of high school. But the real sign that summer had officially begun was the Thompson family's annual neighborhood cookout. Everyone on Willow Lane went. Everyone. Including the Carters. I wasn't planning to go at first. Big neighborhood events always made me nervous. Too many parents asking questions. Too many girls giggling in groups. Too many adults drinking and laughing a little too loudly. But Ethan insisted, "Dude, it'll be fun. Free food, fireworks, and you can help me prank Tyler and shove him into the pool." I reluctantly agreed, but that wasn't the real reason I showed up. I went because I knew she would be there. The Thompsons' backyard was huge, long picnic tables, a deck wrapped in string lights, a pool reflecting the red-orange sky. People were everywhere, talking, laughing, drinking. Ethan ran off instantly to find a group of guys from school. I stood awkwardly near the drink table, sipping Coke and trying not to look like I was looking for her. But I was. Then I saw her. Mrs. Carter stepped out from the deck doors carrying a bowl of salad, her dress catching the glow of the string lights. It was a simple navy blue summer dress, nothing fancy, but it made her look effortless. Beautiful in the kind of way that didn't try to be. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. She greeted a couple of parents, joked with Mrs. Thompson, placed the bowl on a table. Her laugh carried across the yard, soft, familiar, comforting. Then she turned and saw me. That same warm expression she always saved for me appeared, soft, private, like I mattered. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear as she walked toward me. "You came after all." "Yeah, I managed, though my brain short-circuited at the word sweetheart. Ethan dragged me here." She laughed. "Well, I'm glad you came. You clean up nicely." I looked down at my plain shirt, face burning. "It's just clothes. It looks good on you," she said, and her voice went softer. Before I could reply, someone called her name. A man. Mr. Carter. He walked over holding a beer, wearing a forced smile. "Laura, come meet the Hendersons." Her expression tightened so subtly that no one but me would notice. "Michael, I'll see you in a bit." "Okay," she said. I nodded, watching her walk away and feeling that now familiar tightness in my chest. But the night wasn't done with me yet. Later, when it got dark and the adults had started drinking more, the kids drifted toward the pool area. I wasn't interested in swimming to many people. Too much chaos, so I wandered to the side yard next to the garage where it was quieter. That's when I heard them, not yelling, but talking. Low, serious. I peeked around the corner before I realized I shouldn't have. Mr. and Mrs. Carter stood there, half hidden in the shadows cast by the deck lights. Her arms were crossed tightly. His shoulders were tense. "It's one night, Laura," he muttered. "Can't we at least pretend everything's fine? We've been pretending for years." Her voice cracked slightly. Not loud, but enough that it hit me like a punch. Mr. Carter sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not here. Not now. I'm tired, Mark." Her voice wavered. "I'm tired of feeling alone in my own house." My chest squeezed painfully. I shouldn't have been there. I knew that. I should have walked away. But I couldn't move. Mr. Carter lowered his voice even more. "We'll talk at home." She swallowed hard. "You say that every time." Then he walked off, beer bottle still in hand. Mrs. Carter stood alone, her face lit faintly by the string lights. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears but with exhaustion, a deep kind of sadness that made her look older, more fragile. Before I could stop myself, I stepped out from the shadows. She startled, then her expression softened instantly when she saw it was me. "Oh, Michael." She wiped her face quickly even though there weren't tears. "I didn't know anyone was out here." I felt my heartbeat in my throat. "Are you okay?" She exhaled shakily, not crying, just overwhelmed. "I'm fine. Just long day." I didn't know what to say. We were standing so close I could see the fine lines near her eyes. The way her shoulders trembled just slightly. She looked at me differently than she had earlier. Like she wasn't wearing her usual mask anymore. Like she was letting me see something raw. "You shouldn't worry about adult things," she whispered. "But I do," I said before I realized how honest it was. Her eyes softened in a way that made my chest ache. Not romantic, not suggestive, but grateful. Like I was the only person she could be real around. "You're a good kid," she murmured. "Better than you know. You don't look happy," I whispered. She closed her eyes for a second, her voice barely audible. "Some days. I'm not." The silence between us felt fragile. Then fireworks cracked loudly overhead, making both of us jump. She looked up at the sky, then back at me, giving me the faintest, saddest smile I'd ever seen on her. "I should get back," she said gently. "Yeah, okay." As she walked away, her dress brushing lightly against the grass, something hit me hard. I wasn't just in love with her. I was worried about her. Heart deep, bone deep. And the worst part? She was starting to let me see the parts of her she hid from everyone else. I wasn't just a kid anymore. And she wasn't just someone's mom. Something between us, something dangerous, delicate, unspoken was beginning to take shape. And neither of us stopped it. Freshman year hit like a storm. New building, new classes, new faces that didn't know anything about Willow Lane or about who I'd been before. In some ways, it was good a clean slate. In others, it felt like being dropped into cold water. Suddenly awake, suddenly aware of how much everything was changing. One thing changed most. I wasn't at the Carter's house nearly as much anymore. Not because I didn't want to be, but because I didn't trust myself. I told myself it was the smart thing, the responsible thing. A 14-year-old boy shouldn't spend every afternoon around his best friend's mom when he couldn't stop thinking about her. When looking at her made his chest tighten in ways it shouldn't. So I made up excuses. "I've got practice. I've got homework. We have a group project. I'm busy." Ethan bought it. My parents bought it. But she didn't. Not even for a second. It was October when I realized she'd noticed. The air was crisp, the trees on Willow Lane turning red and gold. The Carters were setting up fall decorations, a wreath, some pumpkins, the usual stuff they did every year. I was walking home from school, backpack heavy with textbooks, when she stepped out onto the porch holding a box of lights. When she saw me, she froze. Not in surprise, not in excitement, but in recognition, like she'd been waiting for me. "Michael," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I feel like I never see you anymore." My heart kicked hard. I swallowed. "Yeah, school's busy." She tilted her head slightly, the way she always did when she didn't believe something. "How's Ethan supposed to survive high school without you?" she said lightly, teasingly. But there was something underneath the joke. Something real. "I see him at school," I said. "You used to see him every day." She said it too quickly, honestly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. A car drove by. Leaves blew across the sidewalk. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Then she spoke again, more softly. "Did I do something?" The question hit me like a punch. Her face looked open, worried. She held the box of lights against her hip, her hair falling loosely around her shoulders. She looked less put together than usual, more human. more real, and somehow that made it worse. No, I said quickly. You didn't do anything. Then why does it feel like you're avoiding me? Her voice cracked just slightly on the last word. Avoiding her, not Ethan. And she said it like it mattered. Because it did. I looked away. I just needed space. Space from what? I couldn't answer. She stepped down from the porch, standing closer than she had in months. Close enough for me to see the worrying in her eyes up close. Close enough that I could smell the faint vanilla scent she always carried. Michael, she said quietly, if something is wrong, you can tell me. But that was the problem. I couldn't. Because everything wrong was inside me. The feelings I wasn't supposed to have. The ones growing faster than I could manage. The ones that made me feel guilty even though I hadn't done anything. I forced a shaky laugh. Nothing's wrong. She watched me for a long moment. Too long. Her expression softening into something sad. Something that made me wonder if she knew more than I thought. All right, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm still here. Still offering comfort. Still looking at me like she cared. It made my chest hurt. I nodded, unable to speak. She turned to go back inside, but as she reached the door, she hesitated just for a second and looked back at me. It wasn't a dramatic look. Not longing. Not pleading. Just hurt, and that hurt followed me all the way home, heavy as my backpack, impossible to ignore. Avoiding her wasn't working. It wasn't making my feelings go away. It wasn't making things easier. If anything, the distance made everything worse, sharpening the ache instead of dulling it. Because even when I tried to pull away, she noticed. She cared. And somehow, that made me love her more. By sophomore year, nothing on Willow Lane felt the same. Ethan had grown taller than both our dads. Mr. Carter traveled more than he was home. And Mrs. Carter, she carried something in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not sadness exactly. Not exhaustion. Something like acceptance. A quiet decision forming behind her smile. We drifted into autumn slowly. Like the neighborhood wanted to hold on to the last bit of summer. The lawns stayed green too long. The air stayed warm too late. The leaves didn't fall when they were supposed to. But some things change whether you're ready or not. And sometimes, the moment everything becomes clear doesn't come in a dramatic explosion. Sometimes it comes softly, in an ordinary room, on an ordinary day, with an ordinary sentence that breaks your whole world open. It happened in November, the cold, gray kind of November that never feels like real winter, just the threat of one. Ethan invited me over after school to finish a history project. I hadn't been inside the Carter's house for months except for quick hellos. Walking in felt like stepping into a memory. Same smell, same warmth, same framed photos lining the walls. But I felt different, older, to aware. Mrs. Carter was at the kitchen counter sorting mail. When she heard us come in, she turned. For a second, everything froze. She looked at me the way someone looks at a person they weren't expecting to see but had secretly hoped they would. Her eyes warmed instantly, softening in that way they always had for me. The way that made my stomach twist. Hi, sweetheart, she said gently. That word again. The one she never used with anyone else. I felt heat rise up my neck. Hey, Mrs. Carter. She noticed the shift in me immediately, the way I avoided her eyes. The way I tried to stand farther from the counter. She didn't say anything, but I felt it. In the silence between us. We went upstairs. Ethan spread out the project papers, talking about deadlines and speeches, but my brain wasn't in it. Halfway through, he got a text. Coach moved practice to tonight, he groaned. I gotta go. My mom can drive me. He started packing his stuff, then looked at me. You can stay and keep working if you want. I won't be long. I hesitated. I should have left. But before I could answer, Mrs. Carter called from downstairs, Ethan, come on. We'll be late. And then he was gone running down the stairs, grabbing his cleats, shouting a goodbye as the door closed behind them. Suddenly the house was quiet. I sat alone on the bedroom floor, staring at the open textbook but not reading a single word. I should leave. I should. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, soft, slow, hesitant. The bedroom door opened gently. Michael. I turned. She stood in the doorway, still in her work clothes, dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair falling loose around her face, no makeup now. Just her, real, honest, for a moment. We just looked at each other. I didn't know you were still here, she said softly. Ethan had practice. Oh, she stepped inside a little. Do you want me to drive you home? I can walk. It's getting dark. It's fine, I said quickly, too defensive. Her expression softened into something sad. Something careful, Michael, she whispered. Why are you afraid of being around me? The air left my lungs. You are, she said gently. You haven't been here in months. And when I try to talk to you, you look away. She took another slow step into the room. Did I do something to make you uncomfortable? No, I said instantly, too strongly. Then what is it? I stared at the floor. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, she said. Almost whispering, she sounded. Hurt, but I want you to know something. I lifted my eyes. She wasn't close. She didn't touch me. She didn't do anything wrong. She just spoke. To quiet. She paused. I'm not. I lied. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. You matter to me, she said softly. You always have. Since you were 8 years old standing on my porch too shy to take a cookie. I've watched you grow up into someone kind and thoughtful and good. She took a slow breath. And I don't want you to feel like you have to disappear from my life. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. I didn't want to disappear. Then why did you? She whispered. My throat tightened. Because it hurts. She blinked. hurts. I swallowed hard. No more running. No more lying. I met her eyes, really met them, for the first time in months. Because I feel things I shouldn't, I said, my voice barely audible, and I don't know what to do with it. The room went silent. Absolutely silent. She didn't gasp or look shocked or angry. She didn't step back. She didn't scold me. She just stood there, hands clasped in front of her, her eyes filling with something soft and heartbreaking. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, not condescending, not alarmed, just sad, understanding. She walked past the desk and sat gently on the edge of Ethan's bed, her gaze fixed on the window. She didn't ask questions. She didn't push. She just breathed for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice trembling not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. "You're a young man now," she said softly, "and young men feel deeply, strongly, sometimes confusingly." She hesitated, swallowing, "and I'm honored that you trust me enough to say that." I stared at her, confused. She turned to me, and her eyes, those warm brown eyes I had loved for so long, were full of emotion I couldn't name. "But some feelings aren't meant to be acted on," she said gently, "even when they're real, even when they're powerful, even when they come from a good heart." My chest cracked open. It didn't kill me, but it came close. I nodded slowly. "I know," I whispered. Her expression softened with relief and something like grief. She stood, walked over, and placed a hand lightly on my shoulder, motherly, careful, appropriate. But the touch still lit through me like electricity. "You will love someone one day," she murmured, "someone who is meant for you. Someone your age. Someone who can meet you in all the ways I can't." I felt a tear slip down my cheek before I even realized it was there. She brushed it away gently, with the edge of her thumb, the most careful touch in the world. "And she'd be so lucky," she whispered. There was nothing romantic in her voice, nothing suggestive, nothing improper, just kindness, just tenderness, just truth. That was the moment, not when I first saw her, not when she smiled at me, not when she cried in the kitchen, that moment, when I finally understood the difference between love that grows you and love that breaks you if you hold on to it too long. Because I did love her, and maybe a tiny part of her cared for me in a way she never said out loud. But we existed in different worlds, different ages, different lives. She let her hand fall away slowly. "I'm glad you told me," she said. "It means you're brave." I wiped my face and nodded. "Can we?" My voice cracked. "Can we still be close?" A soft smile, warm, steady, spread across her face. "Always, sweetheart?" And for the first time in years, the word didn't hurt. It healed. That was years ago. I'm older now. I've loved other girls, had real relationships, moved out, grown up. But sometimes when I'm home visiting my parents and I drive past Willow Lane, I still think about her, about the woman who unknowingly raised the boy in the house next door, the woman who taught me what my heart was capable of, the woman who gently, kindly, lovingly let me go. Some stories don't end in romance. Some end in growing up, and this one made me who I am. Time has a strange way of smoothing some things out and sharpening others. High school came and went. College, too. Life scattered all of us in different directions, new cities, new jobs, new responsibilities, but somehow, the memory of Willow Lane never faded, especially not her. I was 26 when I finally drove down that familiar street again. The sun was setting, painting the neighborhood in that soft orange glow I remembered from childhood. The lawns were still perfect, the houses carefully trimmed. The same maple tree leaned a little too far over the Carter's driveway. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Ethan had told me his parents were moving, retirement, downsizing, getting ready for a different chapter of life. He invited me to stop by before they left town. I told myself I came for him, but as I parked in front of the house, my eyes drifted to the front door, and my heartbeat did that stupid, familiar thing it always did. I'd spent years convincing myself I'd grown out of it. But some feelings don't dissolve. They settle deeper. I walked up the driveway slowly, remembering every version of myself that had crossed this same path. The 8-year-old with scraped knees, the 13-year-old full of confusion, the 15-year-old trying too hard to stay away, the 17-year-old who still hadn't fully let go. When she opened the door, she looked almost exactly the same, a little older, a little softer around the edges, but unmistakably her. "Michael?" She breathed, surprise flooding her face. For a second, neither of us moved, and then she pulled me into the warmest hug I'd felt in years. "You look so grown," she said when she stepped back. "Taller, too. My goodness. Took me long enough," I joked softly. But my voice wasn't fully steady, because being this close to her again had hit me harder than I expected. She smiled, that same warm, careful smile that had carried me through childhood and led me inside. The house looked half empty. Boxes everywhere. The walls bare. The hallway that once smelled like cinnamon and fresh laundry now smelled like cardboard and dust. "You're here just in time," she said as she walked toward the kitchen. We almost packed up everything. I followed her, watching the way she moved, graceful, calm, familiar. I hadn't realized how much I missed her until that moment. Later that evening, Ethan stepped out to grab takeout for all of us, leaving me alone with her in the quiet living room. She sat on a box labeled Fragile, looking around the half-empty space. "It's strange," she murmured. "I raised a whole life in this house, and now I'm packing it into containers." There was a soft ache in her voice. "You okay?" I asked gently. She gave a half laugh. Ask me that again once the moving truck leaves. Silence settled between us, not awkward, just full of old memories. Then she looked at me. Really looked. You know, she began, her voice lower. I always wondered how you turned out. I turned out all right, I said quietly. I can see that. She smiled again, but it was sadder this time. You were always so thoughtful, always carrying more than you said. My throat tightened. She wasn't talking about childhood things. She wasn't talking about scraped knees or school tests. She was talking about us. About everything I felt but never admitted. Everything she sensed but never acknowledged. Her eyes held mine for a long, silent moment, to honest, to soft. Too full of things we never said. I missed you, she whispered. My heart cracked open. I missed you too, I said, because it was the truth. The bare, unpolished truth I'd carried for over a decade. She looked down at her hands, a faint, sad smile touching her lips. Life gets complicated, doesn't it? Yeah, I said. It does. We weren't kids anymore. We weren't neighbors. We weren't living in the same world we once shared. But the connection, the quiet bond that had always existed between us, was still there. Still warm? Still alive. I'm glad you came today, she said softly. Me too, I answered. She reached out and touched my hand, gentle, brief, meaningful. And for the first time, it didn't feel confusing or forbidden. It just felt right. A closing of a chapter. A full breath after years of holding it in. Ethan's car pulled into the driveway a moment later, headlights sweeping across the living room windows. She stood and wiped her palms on her jeans. Come on. Let's eat before the boys get cold. But as she walked ahead, she paused and glanced back at me, a look so soft, so full of unspoken history, and whispered, Don't be a stranger again, Michael. And this time, I knew I wouldn't be. The end.